Hey guys, it's CS Joseph with csjoseph.life, obviously because this is season 19, episode 1, because we're actually going to be diving into each of the individual 16 types and basically discussing how to reach their cognitive development per type, basically. So, and I think that's really relevant. I think that's very important because I've gotten so many requests, like consistently, like a ton of requests on, okay, hey, CSJ, what is up with, how do I develop myself? How do I reach cognitive development? How do I mature? What do I have to do to develop my subconscious? What do I have to do to develop my unconscious? What do I have to do to develop my superego? What do I have to develop all of my four sides of the mind? How do I reach enlightenment? How do I reach integration? You're always talking about integration, Mr. CSJ. So how do I actually do that? And for Patreon, season 19, episode 1, and this season 19 is basically how to reach cognitive development, how to reach maturity, how to reach happiness, how to reach integration, how to reach enlightenment, how to reach all those kinds of things, basically, how to better yourself for each of the 16 types. And we're going to be doing a deep dive into each of the individual 16 types to that end, basically. So it's pretty important. So let's talk about cognitive development. So remember, we've been talking about within season 17, and season 19 directly correlates to the content in season 17. So if you haven't taken the time to actually watch season 17, like, what are you doing? Seriously, what are you doing? You need to watch season 17. I get that season 17 is like pretty hokey. I mean, it is hokey. Like, seriously, it's like super out there, very extroverted intuition. It's just way out there. And we talk about the source of all cognition. We're doing a deep dive into what each of the individual sides of the mind are and what those mean. And pretty great to be able to have that opportunity to understand, okay, hey, this is what this side of the mind does, this is what it represents, this is what it's for, etc. We just finished talking about the unconscious, and then we're going to be talking about the superego next, which is very important. But as much as what we're talking about, like what their purpose is, and where they come from, we really need to talk about like how to develop the four sides of the mind and how to advance somebody forward within the four sides of the mind. It's really key to get that done. And but why? I mean, how else is someone going to reach maturity, right? How else is someone going to reach happiness? And maturity and happiness, like, that's great. Those are great things, but honestly, they're not the end all be all, because there's an even higher level above, wisdom and maturity. So it's really necessary for our race to actually come to terms with the four sides of the mind, and also come to terms with like just how important they are and what they mean, and why it's necessary to adhere to these principles that I'm going to lay out in terms of like developing cognition. Because if you think about it, like look at the temperaments, and you can also look at the interaction styles, but like the temperaments themselves, like you can compare them directly to political ideologies, right? So for example, the first temperament, you have the guardians, right? And when guardians take over society, when SJs take over society, I mean, you have what society looks like here within the United States of America. You have an oligarchy, you have the old boys club, etc. Very authoritarian, but they're also, I would say, it's feudal. It's a feudal society. It really is. I mean, a lot of people would argue with me, but it's modern feudalism, like an SJ society is modern feudalism. But then you have the artisan society, and artisan society literally it's anarchy. It's tribalism. It's like cowboy gangs or gangs of New York. It's basically gangs ruling society. That is anarchy, and that is what would happen if that artisan temperament took over a society, right? And then you have the intellectuals. What happens when intellectuals take over society? What happens when it's an NT society, ultimately? And quite frankly, when NT society comes to full fruition, what happens? Well, we have totalitarianism, right? What happens when NFs take over society? Well, we have communism, okay? So the point is that no one is right. No one is right when it comes to political situations. And what we need to do is we need to have integration, right? You need to integrate the four temperaments in order to create that ultimate utopia that the NFs at least are trying to find, or at least the affiliative types, the NFs and the Guardians are trying to get. Whereas the problem is the SPs are like, well, you're going to have to exhibit force upon us. And when you're forcing us, we don't exactly want to live that way. You have no right to tell us exactly how to live our lives. You're taking away our choice. We need to be independent while you folks are all interdependent. So, and it's not enough to really say balance, because it's not about balance. Everyone's like talking about balance all the time. Oh, it needs to be balanced. Oh, it needs to be fair. Oh, Mr. Sans Joseph, like, why are you like so like imbalanced with all of your arguments? Like, don't you even like bother citing your sources every now and then? But here's the thing, like, it's like, oh, why can't you be being like, fair and balanced, like Fox News? Like, seriously, Fox News is fair and balanced, you know what I'm saying? Like, no, I don't know what you're saying, actually. Because here's the rub, okay? Here's the rub. And the rub is that balance is not good enough. Balance is not good enough. You need absolute full-on integration. Like, seriously, full-on integration. And you're not going to get that at a macro level with like society or from a temperament point of view. You're just not going to get that unless you are adhering to, what's happening on the individual level. And that's what season 19 is about. It's about individual cognitive development. It's not, macro cognitive development. And we're going to talk a lot about macro. I mean, eventually, we're talking about how to social engineer individual types. Well, we're going to get to a point where how to social engineer individual temperaments, how to social engineer individual interaction styles. And why would you want to know this? Well, that's very easy. You could win political campaigns that way. You could incite riots like that instantly. You know exactly what to say with certain people present, and if you have all of the pieces in place to start a fire, you literally can say one sentence and you've just created a riot, specifically through social engineering. And social engineering specific temperaments and interaction styles, macro-wise, like straight up, you can do this. It's actually very easy. I've done it. I have created bar fights by saying the wrong thing at the right time, one sentence to one person. And, following the 48 laws of power, never get your hands dirty. So I was using a cat's paw to say it on my behalf so that the cat's paw gets punched and I don't get punched. And then all of a sudden, boom, you have a bar fight on your hands and it's a huge brawl. And guess what? Literal chaos injection, right? Well, how is that possible? Well, social engineering. But here's the thing. That's a nice little tangent. But here's the thing. Like, in order for us to reach, like, integration on a macro level and like somehow like obtain what they call utopia or whatever, if utopia is like even possible, right? Here's the thing, like if you folks want a utopia, I'll tell you exactly how to get utopia right now. One, we need to like take care of the human condition, which is the superego. Like that's first off, that needs to be a point. Also, two, society needs to understand death. Like we need to stop like making memorials or funerals as like, as rosy as possible and actually talk about the truth about people. We need to be able to come to a place as a society where we can remember all of the good and the bad about a person and treat them as an integrated human being and not necessarily like the saint, because no one's a saint. Let's be honest, like no one is. And if we're not being willing to collectively as a race learn from death, etc., then that's just not going to happen. It's like literally not going to happen. And we're not ever going to reach, so-called utopia, right? Even though the Ray Kurzweils of the world are trying to promise utopia through immortality via technology. But let me tell you something, folks, that's nothing more than a slave world when considering he who controls that technology literally controls the destiny of mankind, because they will literally rule over anyone who fears death. And that's not exactly the best situation or scenario to be in, right? Like, why would you want that? Okay. So because of all of these macro problems, like all these macro population problems that we have with the human race, we're really left with like this other approach, right? We're left with this thing where it's like, okay, hey, maybe we need to like really be spending some time investing on the individual. And that is where I maintain society has gone all wrong. So, for example, let's look at the education system. The education system is an absolute waste of time. It is for affiliatives. It favors FITE users over everyone else. Like, take a look at mathematics. Mathematics no longer has anything to do with solving actual problems. And what's funny about that is that Railgun is literally sitting right there doing math right now. But that's another story. But the point is, like, math used to be about like solving actual problems, and yes, some of it has in there. But let's be honest, math is more turned into like math literature, right? Where we're going to change binomials into polynomials, and like, okay, how about like solving problems? What happened to the TIFE of math? Okay, but instead we're just trying to memorize terminology and sound smart instead of actually like solving actual issues. You know what I'm saying? And that's the problem that I have with like modern education, is that there's this huge cognitive bias behind certain types and thinking that education is this one-size-fits-all solution. Well, and again, this is just education. We can like go into parenting and how like certain parents have these cognitive biases. Like, for example, my ENFJ father, he's trying to live vicariously through me, basically. Same with Railgun's father, who's trying to live vicariously through her, through their ISTP subconscious, and trying to get us to behave like STPs, who are all super into sports, super athletic, all about all the mechanics and driving fast cars and fixing cars and being all super capable about all that crap. And it's like, okay, when I just look at my father and I'm like, as a kid, and I'm like, yeah, Dad, I don't want to fix the car right now. Like, that doesn't even interest me. You see what I'm saying? Or like, or here's another story. Like, I played Little League. I played Little League for a year. And honestly, it was specifically to make my dad happy. That's all it was. And get this, I had the highest on-base percentage in the league. The highest on-base percentage. I was on base more than any other baseball player in the entire league in my Little League. And my team was number 1 that year. But here's the thing. I also had the lowest batting average in the league. And my batting average was literally 0. Yeah, my batting average was literally 0. Okay. And so, yeah, think about that. Yeah, that's because my extroverted intuition hero could tell when to swing the bat and when not to swing the bat. And luckily for me, little kid pitchers in Little League are terrible and throw a lot more balls than strikes. And statistically speaking, if I just never swung the bat, I would just be walked over and over and over again, which I was. I was walked all the time. And I scored runs all the time because I was walked all the time. I just had a knack for getting on base, right? See, but that's the point. Like, people. You have people living vicariously through their children. They're assuming that there's, and I'm an FE user, and my dad's an FE user, and thinking about the FE loop relationships where it's like, okay, hey, you're trying to avoid making the other person feel guilty the entire time, while simultaneously making sure that you're not feeling guilty any time. And then there's competition for like who's the more helpful person, in the parenting relationship. That's really useful. And well, that's what I've had to deal with, in my time. So, as a child, basically, with my relationship with my father, and this is a consistent issue. The thing is that parents don't know how to parent children, and as a result of that, they don't know how to encourage children how to cognitively develop. And don't get me wrong, folks, this is not a season that's focusing on how to raise a child. Don't worry, that season's coming. We're going to be going into a whole nother area, into parenting. But this particular season goes into a completely different way, a different way of going about it. And the reason for that is because we're trying to understand what cognitive development is specifically at the individual level, right? It's super important that we do it at the individual level. Because if we do not focus on developing people as individuals, there is no such thing as a one-size-fits-all development solution for a human being. In fact, let's talk about Warren Farrell right now. Some guy that he's absolutely drives me up the wall. I can't stand this guy. In his book, The Boy Crisis, he does a great job of identifying what's wrong with men and how bad things are for men in the United States of America or modern society as we know it. Sure, of course. But here's the issue. The issue is he doesn't have any idea how to solve the problem because he's recommending re-educating boys to become more sensitive like women, which is absolutely dumb. Like, no, it's asinine. That's what it is. Like, so it's asinine. So sorry, Warren Farrell. But the point is that these affiliative people out there, and if you're affiliative, I mean, it happens. But the interdependent people out there who are very authoritarian based because they're affiliative, they imagine it as a result of their ignorance that they have the collective authority to impose a one-size-fits-all development solution, education solution, parenting solution, health solution on literally everybody. And you know what, folks? It's wrong. And all that does is take away from the individual. It destroys individuals. No wonder we are all so mentally unhealthy in modern society. And it's because we are putting our children through systems that should not exist, because the systems only favor the most common of cognitions out there, the most common of psyches out there. The majority is handled, and even then the majority is still unhappy because the minority, the salt of the earth, right? You know what happens when when the earth loses its saltiness? You know what I'm saying? What happens when the salt loses its saltiness? Well, it's thrown out and trampled upon. You see what I'm saying? Like, why is that a thing? But here's the point. If we do not focus on developing the individual, guess what? We're going to lose this society. We are not going to have a future as a human race. It is now time here in 2019 where we have the millennials and the Gen Z and the generation after Gen Z waking up to the fact that everything is just absolutely fucked up. Because it is. It is really fucked up out there. And if people don't really see how screwed up everything is out there in society right now, you are sorely mistaken. And we are setting up our children to having that fear of death and becoming Ray Kurzweil's little slaves, come the 2040s, the 2050s, or the 2060s, when he starts developing his immortality via technology. I mean, you guys think I sound crazy. This stuff is real. Go look it up. Read Singularity theory. Singularity is coming. Singularity is a thing. It is inevitable. I am not a transhumanist, but I am telling you these people exist, and that's what they think. That's what they believe. And you know what? Guess what? I agree with them. I agree that singularity is coming. And if we are not spending time taking care of the individual right now, you are literally dooming your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren to a life of imposed servitude. Slavery, okay? A life of slavery. Because guess what happens? When you make that deal with the devil and you do the expedient thing and you have your immortality via technology, that means there's an off switch. And he who has the off switch can definitely tell you what to do because they literally own you. Okay? And guess what, folks? This is our future. Okay? So, how about we focus on cognitive development of individuals such that we as a society can have true quality of life? Quality of life is everything. Because, like I said, folks, in season 16, episode 8, and season 17, episode 1, okay? In both of those episodes, I talk about how it is important to have a society that instead of being ruled by the fear of death, it is ruled by quality of life, such that there is no fear of death because everyone in that society is living a complete life. The only way that is obtainable... Oh, wait, that sounds like utopia for a second. Like actual utopia? Wonder how that works. Interesting. The only way that's ever going to happen, folks, is if we are helping cognitive develop individuals, okay? So, let me now provide you with an overview as to how that works from a Jungian analytical psychology point of view. The path to enlightenment, basically, season 19, episode 1, the path to enlightenment. It's like, okay, wait a minute, did you literally just do a 24-minute introduction? Yeah, kind of, because this is a very important lecture series. And folks, you guys just have to have that foundation as to why we're doing it and what's the point of it. I can't just automatically say, what it is. So Anyway, with that being said, let's get down into how to reach cognitive development: hero, child, parent, inferior. Why is that necessary? Because when you have a person, right, and they have the top four functions within their ego being developed, you have to understand that those functions develop in a certain order, okay? And the first one is obviously hero. That's the apex of the ego. It's the very first one. It's the very first approach, and it's an area that needs to be generally understood. So, with that being said, the hero develops first. It's the ego. It's the apex of the conscious mind, and we talk about that a lot in season 17, episode 2, right? However, as much as some people like Dave's superpowers would say that, oh, the auxiliary function, aka the parent function, according to John Beebe's model, John Beebe. And if you haven't read Energies and Patterns of Psychological Type by Dr. John Beebe, what are you doing with your life? You need to read that book. It helps you understand the cognitive senses, aka the cognitive functions, in a much more meaningful way. But to be able to do that from like so understand that like your parent function is not the function that develops second. Actually, it's the child function. The child function. The reason why is that when the mind is first developing its ego, the hero function and the child function come first. They come first because they are the optimistic functions. They are the primary functions. They are not the secondary functions. The parent function and the inferior function are secondary functions. And because of that, it can cause... oh, thank you. Oh, yes, it's charging. Awesome. Oh, wireless charging is the dopest. Thank you, Railgun. Awesome. We have like electricity now. All right. So yes, and we can continue the lecture even though we're like changing power and sound on the fly. Awesome. So yes, the hero function is first, but the child function is second. And this is why we end up getting into cognitive loops. And I'm going to actually talk about this a little bit more in depth, probably as an additive to season 16 or season 18, probably season 18, because we're going to be talking about cognitive axis and cognitive orbit heavily in season 18, but for season 19, the hero and the child, they can team up with each other, they can create a loop, and the reason why is because there isn't a parent function between, or developed enough, sitting between the hero or the child function itself, right? And this is a serious issue. That issue is, people are like, why is that guy so mature? Why is that guy a man-child? And it's because, well, his parent function isn't developed. Like, I mean, let's talk about INFJs, right? It's like, oh, I have this God complex because I have my NI hero and I just do whatever I want and I want to tell you the truth, and regardless of whether or not it's socially appropriate for me to tell you the truth anyway, and I'm not even aware of what you think, and I'm not even aware of proper thinking in general, so I am at risk of believing just about anything, and then I'm going to tell you all about it and potentially alienate you with what I think is true. And when it's not even socially appropriate and they don't understand that they're harming people around them and alienating them, it's because their parent function isn't awakened and there's no sense of responsibility. This is a problem, okay? And then after the parent function actually does awaken and the person is finally taking personal responsibility in their life for once, oh wait, the INFJ realizing that it should not be alienating people with what it thinks is true, and realizing that, people just might actually know things and that the INFJ might not be the only person in the world that knows things for once, right? Yeah, that'd be nice, and then, personal responsibility kicks in. And now they're taking responsibility for their actions. That is their FE. That's their FE parent, And then guess what? They still have to get over their fear, and then in comes the inferior function. It is the fourth and final function of the ego to fully develop and fully manifest in a child. And then boom, the ego is fully formed. This is excellent. Now, I'm going to be talking about two competing theories of child development soon, but we're going to lightly touch on them here. From a child development standpoint, there's this concept known as quadra shifting, and it's only a theory. And it's basically that you're part of a quadra. So I'm in the SFJ NTP quadra, also known as the alpha quadra, according to socionics. And the alpha quadra itself, the alpha quadra, it's all about past focused, it's duty based, but it can see into the future. It can prognosticate, it can predict things ahead of time. It has all those advantages to it. It also is very good at long suffering, very caring to other people, and seeks truth as much as possible. This is the alpha quadra, and we're going to be diving a little bit deeper into the alpha quadra into season 17. Now, the thing is, though, is that when you're developing your inferior function, it's another gateway function in as much as the hero function is. But each of the individual functions within the ego itself has a special connection. It has a special connection to each of the sides of the mind. Now, because the ego itself is the apex of the rest of the human soul, or the rest of the human psyche, okay? Because remember, your brain is nothing more than an interface, okay? Think about it. Like your computer, your keyboard, your mouse, your monitors, all of that, the operating system is just, well, not really the operating system, but the how you interact as a human with your operating system on your computer, that is your interface, basically. And people talk about, oh, well, you have a graphical user interface. That could be like Windows, and that's, how you interact with your operating system through the graphical user interface to be able to interface between a human and a computer so that the human can communicate and use the computer as a tool. Well, guess what, folks? That's what our brain is. It's just an interface. It's not actually the soul itself. And I'm so tired of SE users, especially INFJs. INFJs, you folks trigger me so much when you refer to your soul as your brain. And INTJs do it too. You SE inferiors, like seriously, I'm so tired of that. Like I just have to rant about that for a second because it's so annoying. It's like, oh, my brain did this. And I'm like, your brain is just a chunk of fat in your skull, dude. It's all it is. It's just matter. It's just an interface, those neurons and whatnot. It's just an interface for something metaphysical outside of this reality, interfacing with our brains to our central nervous system, because our central nervous system is nothing more than a radio transceiver, okay? Receiving our psyches and transceiving through our psyches and other psyches around us. That's all it is, okay? Because guess what, folks? Our souls are very metaphysical and do not exist in this physical plane in the same way that we exist in a physical plane of existence, and what is on our computers is in a different physical plane itself, folks. It's completely different. Even though the components of the computer really exist in the physical environment, like all of those all of that data moving through those, I could start sounding like the, Jeff Bridges and that Tron, the grid, etc. Little highways and byways for data to move across. It's no different with human beings, folks. Your brain is just the interface. Your brain is a tool in as much as the rest of your body is. It's just a very sensitive part of the tool that is your body. But your mind, your psyche itself, your soul itself literally exists outside of this body, and this body is nothing more than a radio transceiver to send and receive from your psyche and other psyches around it. That's all it is for. And you people think that the psyche is within the body. Yeah, sir, it could be within it, but again, it's just a interface. This is why we can't replicate souls. And eventually, people think that we're going to be able to transfer souls to other bodies and whatnot. Sure, we may be able to, because perhaps, we're able to find out the electricity and the neurons itself, almost like at the base level of string theory, etc. And if we're able to reach string theory and manipulate string theory, and maybe string theory has something to do with the human soul itself, or maybe this human soul is made up of a special kind of string or a specific energy source that we can manipulate someday, who knows? But the point is, or maybe we're able to transfer his data. I don't know. It could happen. But again, based on what I can tell so far, until I'm proven otherwise, my working theory is, the human soul is just interacting with this interface known as the body in the same way. I'm getting really Matrix here. You know what I'm saying? Yes. Okay. But fair enough. But look at it this way. The ego itself, the hero function, did you know that the hero function literally contains the rest of the ego within itself almost? It's like the avatar of the ego itself. Whereas the child function is the avatar of the subconscious and all of the inner workings of the subconscious itself, all the inner workings of the subconscious, all the actions taken by the subconscious, all the development of the subconscious, all the happiness obtained from the subconscious, all of the fear obtained from the subconscious is actually directly impacting the child function at all times. And the child function is basically like the master of the subconscious, even though the inferior function is the gateway into the subconscious. Okay, because of how its relationship to fear is. It's the gateway, but ultimately the subconscious serves the needs of the child, right? Because the child is all about having joy. The child wants to be happy, right? And so the subconscious, when it gains happiness as a result of getting over fear and taking the leap of faith that it needs to take, is ultimately serving the needs of the child, right? But the unconscious is serving the needs of the parent, okay? It's serving the needs of the parent, okay? Because a person's source, the source of wisdom, a person gains wisdom from the unconscious, because the unconscious exists as chaos to challenge the ego, because the feminine or the chaos challenges the order. The ego is supposed to bring order to chaos, as much as the ego represents the masculine component or the yang component, and the unconscious represents a feminine component, a yin component, a chaotic component that challenges the yang of the ego itself, right? Well, the ego itself, obviously it contains these four components of the hero, parent, child, inferior. But the parent function, itself is all about, utilizing the wisdom gained from the unconscious. But guess what? If you don't have a developed unconscious, then you don't have a developed sense of responsibility within your parent. How is your parent function going to function properly if your unconscious is not developed properly, right? How is your child function going to function properly if your subconscious is not developed? Wait a minute, how is your inferior function going to function properly if your superego isn't developed either? Now, hold on. I get that's a little confusing because we've been talking about how the inferior function is the gateway into the subconscious, which it is. It is the gateway into the subconscious. But again, I'm talking about where each of the functions within the ego are being served by the four sides of the mind themselves. It gives you a completely different physical or metaphysical view of the shape of the human soul, basically. Because while certain areas can be accessed with certain functions, at the end of the day, the functions themselves, through cognitive orbit and whatnot, the certain sides of the mind are serve the needs of certain functions within the ego itself. That's basically the whole point of getting there. And then why is this relevant? Because in order for you to reach a stage of true cognitive development, stage of true integration, or ultimately what we call enlightenment, and I'm not talking like the Buddhist enlightenment, because the Buddhist enlightenment, in my opinion, is the same philosophy as the cremation of care. That song that they sing to themselves, at the Bohemian, at the Bohemian Club, I believe, where they're walking around, dancing around in front of this owl statue or whatever. I don't know. I don't even know what that's about. But the cremation of care. It's where people are literally claiming that they could care less about something. And that's what a lot of Eastern philosophies teach. Enlightenment really is. And I disagree. I think enlightenment is really about becoming an integrated human being, and a being who has true inner peace as a result of the four sides of the mind finally working in harmony with each other, being united towards a current goal instead of being conflicted, right? Because that conflict within is ultimately a direct result of the human condition, which is basically the source of sin nature, right? So we have to avoid, we have to find the cure for the human condition, the cure for sin nature, and the only way that's going to happen is if collectively we are integrated. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that we may not require divine providence or divine intervention to make sure that we're able to reach that standpoint. It's very likely that that will happen. I would say, yes, that's absolutely necessary. But until then, we need to actually position ourselves collectively for greatness so that we're getting ready for that day to happen. I mean, come on, you can make the argument of the parable of the 10 virgins right now. We need to make sure our oil lamps are full so that when the bridegroom comes along, we're ready to go with him. You know what I'm saying? And the only way that's going to happen is if we are positioning ourselves for greatness, we are focusing on developing ourselves through cognitive development and reaching integration and reaching enlightenment, okay? So let's talk about the process overall, the process of cognitive development overall as compared to, other processes, basically. And so the first one is really the gateway functions themselves. And, the hero contains the ego. And, you come to realize that, I am a person. I remember the day where I realized that, I was actually conscious, that I was actually a person, that I am I am me, I remember that day. I was like 3 or 4 or something like that, where I had that realization that, I'm actually my own, I am me, I exist, right? It's that self-awareness. And that's really the first part, in cognitive development, is reaching that self-awareness and understanding, what your strengths and weaknesses are in that area. But it's also to, understand, it's the default. It's very easy to become capable, with your hero function, because it's your first mode of transport. It's where it doesn't cost you as much mental energy. It's like square one. It's like home. It's like base, basically. You can always go back to that point, no matter what, and it's not an issue. It really is no issue, to that end. So you have to understand, your first gateway, it's like a freebie. You're given your hero function. Boom, there you go. It's your starting piece. It's your starting point. It's literally, when the gun is raised and they fire the gun at the beginning of a race, and boom, you have your hero function and you're off to a great start. That's pretty simple. I mean, like my niece, she's an ISTP, and she's got little TI hero, and she's TI heroing everybody, even as an almost 2-year-old. It's really, really cute, really adorable, and she has amazing curls and whatnot. But she's a very adorable little girl, little ISTP, and she's pretty cool. It's just that she's TI heroing all the other people, even adults, even little kids. She's like, no, and it's because she's like, you're taking away my choice, or that's not true. And she'll correct people, because it's like, no, that's just not how it is, because she sees everything in a black and white, true false point of view. Nothing wrong with that, right? So again, the hero is basically the freebie. Just understand something about the hero. If you're going to compare the hero to the parent function being 75 frames a second, right? The hero function being 100 frames a second. Where is it getting that extra 100 frames a second? Cognitive orbit-wise, you actually combine the nemesis function with the demon function to get an additional 25 frames a second, because the nemesis function and the demon function is actually contained within the hero itself. That's why the hero is so powerful, is because it's taking additional energy from the nemesis function and the demon function. That cognitive axis itself is augmenting its energy directly into the hero, and that's why it's strong. It's like a parent, it's like an upgraded parent, and it's upgraded with the ally and or the villain per se, as well as the demon or the angel, etc. And all of that additional power is conferred upon the hero function, because it contains those components within itself, right? And then the hero is like its own, now I'm like a superstar, I'm going to own everything, right? Like my extrovert intuition hero, able to anticipate. I time travel all the time with my extroverted intuition. I time travel into the past, my introverted sensing, but I time travel all the time into the future with my mind, and I play out so many different scenarios, so many different future possibilities, and I just know which one is going to come true. I just know it. based on information with TI parent. They're able to verify those futures and eliminate which futures are not going to happen and which ones are going to happen. And then as a result, I make decisions based on those intuitions, and it ends up creating success for me as a result of those intuitions. But again, like developing your hero, you just have to use it. You just have to use it. I mean, the other functions. I could make the same argument. Yeah, just use those functions. Use that axis. Use this. Use that. And another thing about cognitive development you have to realize is that if you're using one function, the other function within its axis is also being used. So what's on the axis of the hero? Well, the inferior function. So as you use your hero function, you are also going to be using your inferior function. Cognitive orbit speaking, if you're using your hero function, you also will be using your nemesis function at the same time. So you're actually potentially using other functions, developing other functions, specifically when using one of the functions that is within your ego. That is a lot to keep track of, folks. It's hard. It's a lot of information because, wait a minute, that's like, hold on, how many different combinations is that? I'm like, yeah, seriously, pull out a calculator and do some math while you're at it. You know what I'm saying? Like human cognition is that complex. It's like, oh, Mr. C.S. Johnson, but like I'm an ESTJ and like I'm super jealous of like everything you know because I wish I could be as cool as you, but I'm not because my INFP subconscious is like trying to be that super academic, and I'm really sensible in my academic approach, but I just can't believe anything you're saying, because it's like, why should I? Why should I believe anything you're saying? Why should I? Because I can't go look this up anywhere else. And I'm like, yeah, because you're not going to find it anywhere else, okay? Like, I'm sorry. I spent, the majority of my 20s in the ditch studying this so that I can get myself out of the ditch, all right? I mean, you're not going to find this elsewhere because this is pretty unique. Now, I've had people teach me a lot of things about this, but then as a result of knowing it so well, then you start to realize that there's other truths using TI parent, expert intuition hero. It's mostly TI parent. You can logically figure out the rest of what's actually happening. And that's the thing. People don't realize that. Hello, logic is like a thing. You don't necessarily have to be like that's the thing about ESTJs. It's so frustrating where they just automatically assume that everyone else has the idea before, and the idea has pre-existed before, where they don't even understand logical chains of custody and how people can come to their own ideas. I mean, maybe those ESTJs should get off their ass and read the book Big Magic so they can actually understand how that works, instead of continuing to have their heads in the sand and being ignorant. Oh wait, everyone does that. Stop having your head in the sand and stop being ignorant. Oh, maybe you might cognitively develop as an individual if you're not being so ignorant. You know what I'm saying? So here's the issue. How to reach cognitive development. You really have to understand, use the function. But remember, when you're using a function, you're also using other functions. When you focus on developing one function, you're actually developing other things. So you don't really want to focus on developing one individual function per se, as much as you want to focus on developing entire axes, entire orbits, or entire sides of the mind, right? That's what you want to do. But wait a minute, which one do you want to do first? You know what? That's up to you. That's really up to you. The education system that I just seriously harangued within the first 30 minutes of this lecture, the education system is absolutely terrible. And because of said education system, we find ourselves in a situation where they're telling everyone, you need to focus on developing the weaknesses instead of the strengths. I'm here to tell you otherwise. If you have strengths, focus on the strengths, abandon the weaknesses until your strengths have basically been completely maxed out, and then focus on your weaknesses. You are more likely to reach success doing that than doing anything else. Do it right, folks, and do it right the first time, please. So guess what? You have your hero function, part 1, I am unique, the first gateway. Ooh, great, you get a freebie. Congratulations, you're a human being. Somehow you got through the 400 trillion to 1 chance that you exist. Great, and you get a hero function as by default. Congratulations. You get the easy button on that one. But what do you got to develop for the subconscious? Well, you have to understand that the second gateway function, also known as the inferior function, you have to start developing that and develop its orbit. If you're using your hero function, you're technically already developing your inferior function, which is really great. But here's the thing though, what gets in the way of the inferior functions to being developed further? Fear, insecurity, right? And that's another issue, folks. If you want to start developing your subconscious and becoming a happier person, you have to do something. Let go of your fear and start acting in faith. It is written, walk by faith, not by sight. Okay? What does that mean? It means that you need to be willing to take risks. You need to be willing to not be afraid and really go for it. It's funny, like seeing inferior functions, and then like when they're paired up with their cognitive synchronous hero functions, and how much more room those hero functions give the inferior functions to develop, such that it creates an engine of development that leads to a higher level of happiness over time that's attained. And it could even be faster because there is so much room, so much cognitive space that's given to those inferior functions that the inferior functions can actually stretch their legs within the channel or the frequency or the available amplitude provided by the wavelengths of, guess what, the hero function itself. It's no different, right? There's a lot of space there that can be contained, right? So you need to be willing to take a leap of faith. You need to turn your fear into faith, right? So look at an ENTJ, which is like one of the most faithless of all the types because they have SI trickster. They can't help but not have faith. Not a bad thing, But the thing is, though, is that they have to have enough faith in themselves, enough self-confidence, because self-confidence really is self-faith. Think about it. Think about that for a second. Self-confidence is self-faith, because when you're using ISFP subconscious to create a production of art, they're so afraid that they're not good enough or they're not worthy enough to produce art that's actually good, that actually that's something that's meaningful or something that someone would really, really appreciate, that someone would think highly of and give them status, something that is noteworthy, something that is highly regarded, some kind of art that is highly respected. And they're so afraid that it's not going to happen that they don't do it. But when they get to the point in time in their life where they're like, hey, I've been through so much crap in my life, what business do I have being afraid? And all of a sudden they have self-confidence. Oh, wait, so developing your inferior function literally leads to self-confidence. That's correct. Also known as self-faith. Because if you have faith that the art being created by ISFP subconscious will be appreciated by somebody, guess what? You will do it very well and you will become aspirational and you aspire and you're able to aspire as a result of having self-confidence, as a result of having self-faith. Because it is written, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you can say to the mountain, aka the obstacle in life, you can say to the mountain, be thou removed, and it will get out of your way. And that obstacle in life will be gone, specifically because you had faith. But if you're afraid of that mountain's always going to be there and it's always going to hold you back. You have to have the faith necessary to get past that. So faith is an absolute requirement. And I'm not talking about like faith in religion, faith in God, faith in this, faith in that. No, it's all about having faith in oneself. It's all about having the self-confidence, right? And developing self-confidence is absolutely necessary. Getting over your fear. The thing is, though, is luckily we have 8 different inferior functions and each person has only one inferior function. So each person really only has this fear in one area. We talked about ENTJs. They're afraid of being bad people, so they just have to work on getting over their fear of being not worthy, right? Or you have ESTPs and ESFPs who are afraid of wanting the wrong things, or afraid of afraid of their choice being removed, or afraid of making the wrong choice, or etc., or afraid of the consequences of their actions, right? Because they understand consequences of reactions because they're literally walking cause and effect machines. And they understand the effects of everything. And because they understand the effects of everything, they're afraid of causing the wrong effect. Because they know the effect that they want, but they're not sure they're going to get the effect that they want. So when they make a decision to cause something, they're hoping for that effect that they want, and they're afraid they're going to get the wrong effect, right? It's cause and effect. And that's the issue, right? So they need to have self-confidence that what they want is the right thing because they're going to get the right effect when they use the right cause, etc. Welcome to NI inferior, right? It's all about having self-faith, self-confidence, right? And remember, the child contains the subconscious energy because that's where the subconscious energy comes through the inferior gateway and it's served up to the child on a silver platter. But you have to develop your gateway function, your inferior function, which is a little tiny gate, for example, but that gate gets bigger and is able to take a lot more over time. It needs to be expanded. And the only way it gets expanded is if the hero itself is expanded and also if a person is getting over their fear and having faith instead. And I get that the introverted sensing is the function that produces faith, and I get that, but I'm talking more like a self-confidence faith. The English language is terrible in this way. I bet I'd probably be better off speaking in Russian or speaking in German or speaking in Chinese, actually, because Chinese has so many words for like literally everything that I could probably more accurately describe what I'm talking about in those languages than the English language, let's be honest. So again, for cognitive development, the first gateway function, you have to develop your hero gateway. Well, guess what? It's default and it's the easiest to develop. So I'm kind of like, okay, great. The next one is your inferior function. You have to develop that in order to gain access to your subconscious. And you're aspiring, and you do that by having self-confidence. You build that self-confidence by getting over your fear, getting over your insecurities, and developing each of those things. Like, for example, if you're socially anxious with FE inferior, go force yourself to help other people. And through helping other people, you will not necessarily find yourself in a situation where you're being guilted into things anymore because you've already helped a certain person and realize that because you have helped them, they technically owe you instead of you owing them. And then all of a sudden you realize you don't owe anybody anyway, anything. And because you don't owe anybody anything, well, guess what? That means they can't feel bad about you, which means you don't feel guilty about them anymore. You see what I'm saying? And then they can't control you anymore, and then you're free, FE inferior, right? Because you are secure. You are confident because you have gone out of your way to be helpful to those people, and you've gone out of your way to make people feel good, right? FE inferior, it's the same thing. NI inferior, getting the right effect for the cause that it creates. Well, guess what? It sees a consistent pattern through experimentation of getting the right effect that it's looking for. Great. It can, in confidence, know that it's doing the right thing, and the fear sheds away, and it becomes aspirational and is able to even get better effects later. That's the greatness of NI inferior, because that SE hero then is empowered to literally create the ultimate reaction or the ultimate experience, the ultimate shared experience for everyone involved, such that it is so meaningful and so impactful it will never be forgotten. It's like literally stored in physical reality forever. I mean, look at the pyramids, right? So you have to conquer fear and take that leap of faith and then develop that self-confidence. Why else do you have people like Owen Cook talking about cold approach pickup when he's like with these pickup artist people on RSD Motivation channel here on YouTube or on his podcast and whatnot? Same thing. The third step that needs to be taken in developing for cognitive development is literally to gain wisdom and overcoming worry. And you can't overcome your worry or your concerns until you gain wisdom. Wisdom is everything. And you do this within your unconscious by your nemesis function. Develop your nemesis function. Turn it away from being a nemesis, or aka the villain, and turn it into an ally, such that it gains you the ability to utilize your critic function, which is where your wisdom exists. And then you use that critic function's wisdom to provide that to your nemesis function so that your nemesis function is no longer worried. Because guess what, folks? If you have all the wisdom in the world, you can get anything you want. You can literally achieve anything. A wise man is capable of anything and everything. You literally want to gain all things. You want to inherit all things. You want all things to be possible for you. Then guess what, folks? Gain wisdom. It is the most valuable substance in the cosmos. There's a reason for that. Gain wisdom. Because if you have wisdom, you can have anything you want. Anything you want. That's the point. So, if you're a wise man, or wise woman, what business do you have being worried? Think about that. What business do you have being worried? So, to develop your unconscious side of the mind, it's literally you're gaining wisdom. Gaining wisdom, right? And then to develop your subconscious side of your mind, you're literally gaining faith. Interesting how that works. After you've gained all the faith you need and gained all the wisdom you need, which, by the way, you should only be seeking to continuously gain faith and continuously gaining wisdom indefinitely, and doing those two things, right, such that at that point in time you are strong enough to literally go after the big daddy, which is the superego. Now, the superego is the source of the human condition. It is the source of sin nature. It is a continuous problem for human beings. And its gateway is the demon function. But how do you turn that demon function angelic? How are you even able to do that, right? Well, there's a lot of different ways, but here's the thing. You can't turn that demon function unless you have faith and unless you have wisdom. The faith required to conquer the subconscious and the wisdom required to conquer the unconscious. At that point in time, it takes both faith and wisdom, as well as your hero directing all that, being the apex. And the hero is able to utilize wisdom and faith simultaneously in a yin and yang equilibrium to create the ultimate weapon, aka an internal philosopher's stone, aka I win button. I'm making fun of occultists when I say that. Like, seriously, they're like, I am not an occultist, but I understand, like, people who talk about alchemy and whatnot. The metaphysical alchemy within the soul is actually really what it is. You know, it's not about like having like, you know, like actual like an actual philosopher's stone that can turn anything to gold or make an elixir that gives you immortality. It's not about that. It's about developing that internal I win button to be able to face down the abyss itself, to face down death itself, death of the soul itself within the abyss, which is the superego. And to be able to do that, well, guess what, folks? You need to be able to have all the wisdom and the faith to be able to do that, right? So remember, wisdom is beyond what is true and false. It is beyond good or bad, right? It is beyond that. So if you need wisdom, well, read the book of James. It tells you how to get it. Also read the book of Proverbs and the book of Ecclesiastes. I know these are biblical books, but quite frankly, in my opinion, they have the highest understandings of what wisdom is than any other book. I would also offer the 48 Laws of Power, Mastery, actually everything that Robert Greene has ever wrote in your study of wisdom. Study Robert Greene and study the book of James, the book of Proverbs, and the book of Ecclesiastes in the Bible, on top of Robert Greene, 48 Laws of Power, 33 Strategies of War, the 50th Law, Mastery, the Laws of Human Nature, the Art of Seduction, etc. All of these things to really kind of start to really begin a grasp of what wisdom is all about, what it means. And then also to have faith. And faith literally is defined as this: evidence of things hoped for and certainty of things unseen, right? That's what faith is, okay? So once you understand those concepts and you have enough faith, enough wisdom, you can begin the process of changing your demon function, getting your demon function to aspire in the same way the inferior function aspires, and get the demon function to aspire into an angel or an angelic function, basically, such that you're turning your superego into something that is divine, right? That has its own like miraculous divinity, where instead of actually creating miracles of destruction, it's creating miracles of construction, right? Where it's actually building and not destroying, because the demon exists and it's extremely powerful, and it has probably the most understanding of its cognitive function. Like expert intuition demon really does understand expert intuition, whereas expert intuition trickster has no clue what expert intuition is, because it's optimistic and it's kind of like arrogant in that way. Oh, I think I know what I'm talking about, when it really doesn't. Whereas the demon function is actually trying to avoid that, right? That's the difference. So So basically when you begin the process of developing your superego and you're developing it from that demon to that angelic function, then you're able to literally, what's the result of that? You're able to create miracles. It becomes miraculous. And what does it take? It's really all about life and death. It's really about dying to oneself, right? So that, the man can be alive, right? But that's more of like, an unconscious approach, but it's more like dying to oneself for the sake of others. And it is very miraculous, but how do you do this? How do you reach that level of the superego? How do you develop it? Well, it's really, really easy. Let me tell you how. And guess what? This was spoken about, I think, in the Gospel of Matthew. And it says, love your neighbor as yourself. It's that easy. That's how you develop your superego. But guess what, folks? People are incapable of loving their neighbor as themselves until they have faith and until they have wisdom. Because if you don't have the wisdom or the understanding of the human beings around you, how can you actually love them? If you don't have the wisdom or understanding for yourself, how can you love yourself? Because if you can't love yourself as love your neighbor as you love yourself implies, love your neighbor as yourself, if you cannot love yourself, you cannot love anybody else, okay? So love itself is a miracle, and love is what actually comes as a result of the superego. And love, actual love for your fellow man, right, really comes as a result of developing your superego. You can't do that unless you have wisdom and the understanding. Because here's the thing, folks. If you can understand your fellow beings and actually understand them, guess what? You can love them. Just like I've talked about with Ender Wiggin and Ender's Game, that book, right? He talks about, I can understand my enemy so much and so well, so perfectly well. I can understand my enemy that I end up loving them. I end up falling in love with them. And when I love my enemy, I can destroy them. That's the point, folks. Because it's all about love. That is what the superego is. That is how you develop your superego, is by actually loving and caring for your fellow human beings. That's how you turn the demon function into a angelic function, when the demon function no longer seeks to destroy, but it actually seeks to use its power for the sake of love and not death, right? Because the demon function is an avatar of death, because the demon function is innately, like, it's super powerful, it's really jaded, it's very bitter, and it's like, no one is deserving of my love, etc. But when the demon becomes the angel, it is loving. It's loving. That's what the superego is for. The superego is no longer supposed to be the superfluous ego. It's supposed to be the required ego. It's supposed to be the ego that is necessary, the additional ego that is necessary to cause mankind to love each other, where mankind ultimately becomes this one brotherhood of love, brotherly love, phileo love for their brother, or even beyond that, unconditional love. Because there is no greater love than when a man gives up his life for his beloved, okay? There's no greater love. So it's a miracle. And the miracle that is produced by the superego when it is developed is love. How do you develop superego? By loving other people. But you can't love anyone unless you understand yourself and you understand others, which is why we're talking about the psychology to begin with. You have to understand human nature and how it works. If you don't understand human nature, if you don't have that wisdom, you're not getting anywhere. And here's the thing. Even if you do have that wisdom, if you don't have the self-confidence, if you don't have that self-faith, you're not going to get anywhere either. Because you have to have both. And guess what? Self-confidence and self-faith, where does that come from? Humility. You have to humble yourself. You have to realize that you're flawed. You have to realize that, yeah, you're insecure, and yeah, you're not really great at certain things, and yeah, you're inferior in these areas, but you still keep going anyway, folks. Okay? It's all about that. Taking that leap of faith. It's all about humility. So when you combine humility as a result of conquering your fear and having faith, and the humility extracted from the subconscious, and the wisdom extracted from the unconscious, then and only then can you truly love your neighbor as yourself and actually love other people. And then as a result of loving your fellow man for real, then your superego will develop. Whereas, for example, my ESTP wants to dance over everyone's burning corpse and destroy reality itself, that it ends up being willing to sacrifice itself for the sake of reality, just like Tony Stark did at the end of Avengers Endgame. And I get that's a spoiler, but if you haven't watched the movie by now, come on. Seriously, come on. So that's it, folks. That's literally the entire path to integration right there. You realize I am becoming self-conscious and reaching consciousness through the hero function. That's the first step. That's the first gateway. And it's the default gateway. Then you have to conquer your fear, have self-confidence, self-faith, and then ultimately, and that comes through exercising humility. That is the key to becoming happy in the subconscious, because if you are humble, everyone will raise you up and you'll be more successful and you'll be more happy, okay? And then the third step is develop your unconscious. You do this by gaining wisdom and understanding. And then once you have all those pieces in place, and only after you have all those pieces in place, you can begin to develop the superego, turn the demon into the angel. You do this by love and loving your neighbor as yourself. And then as a result of that love, you literally will create miracles, not just for yourself, but for anyone that comes into contact with you. Such is the path of integration. Such is the path to enlightenment. So, folks, if you found this lecture useful, helpful, educational, and or enlightening, I think this is a pretty good foundational lecture for what we're trying to achieve here in Season 19. We're going to be going through each of these paths to success within each of the types in the quest to obtain humility, self-faith, how that leap of faith, develop, getting over our fear, and then also overcoming our worthy by gaining wisdom and understanding, such that we can reach the point where we can finally love with our superego and develop our superego, so that we can finally reach integration, we can finally reach enlightenment. And we're going to be going over how each of the 16 types achieves just that within Season 19. So glad to have you folks here to be able to do our Season 19. Thank you for all your support, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a good night.